My name is Alara Quinn, 32 years old. Tuesdays at the hospital have a certain taste: chlorhexidine on my hands, tin coffee, the metallic breath of the recovery ward. I was at the scrub sink between cases when my phone, face down on a stack of folded gowns, jittered like a trapped insect. I towed the cart closer and tipped the screen with a knuckle. 4 words sat there, neat as stitches. We need space, don't reach out. My mother never wasted syllables when she wanted to wound. A second later, a bright red heart popped underneath. My sister's like a confetti cannon at a funeral. I stood dripping, the paper towel cooling my wrists, while I stared at the kind of sentence that empties a room without moving a chair. Through the doors, monitors beamed steady green. An orderly laughed softly. Someone's TV sitcom pushed canned cheer down the hall. My lungs forgot how to count. I dried, slid the phone into my jacket pocket, and lifted my eyes to oar 4, where a spine waited that would not care whether I'd been uninvited from a life I'd been underwriting. Work saves me because it is so literal. Things either hold or they don't. You fix what you can, you document what you did, and you don't beg a vertebra to appreciate you. Clamp, visualize, cut, cauterize, check. When the case ended, we wheeled the patient under lights the color of warm milk. "Nice work," the anesthesiologist murmured. I nodded, said thanks, and excused myself, palm still steady while the floor slid a half-inch under me. In the lounge, I made the mistake of opening my mother's social feed, the photos loaded in a golden scroll. Last night's birthday party at the Cherry Hill Country Club, chandeliers scaling the room like crystal vines, the cake frosted to look like marble, a trellis of white flowers, under an arch the size of a good apology. My father held a flute mid-toast, chin lifted to catch the best light. My sister pressed her cheek to my mother's, both gleaming like they'd been polished for the lens. The caption said, "A perfect night with everyone who matters." I waited for the "more" button to reveal the joke. It didn't. Under the carousel, a florist tagged their business. "So honored to design Carol's big night." A line-item image, why would they post that, showed standing arrangements plus all arch plus delivery. The last 4 digits on a card number, small but visible, turned my stomach cold. I knew those digits. The number was linked to the family trust portal I managed. I didn't remember authorizing a florist for anything. My email held another red flare I'd ignored on autopilot. Urgent. Beneficiary authorization from the trust accountant. The preview text read, "New subaccount attached to Carol Events seeks retroactive." I locked the screen with the same reflex that stops a bleed. The patient in room 6 needed me in 6 minutes. Triage isn't only for bodies. After the last surgery, the hospital fell to that soft evening hush that feels like a chapel. I walked the corridor slow enough to hear the change in the air, the day staff gone, the night staff gentle-footed, the vending machines wearing their blue glow. In my office, the desk lamp cast a warm circle that made the rest of the room feel like sea. I set the phone down face up and watched. We Need Space look smaller than it felt. I called the accountant before the hour could turn. He picked up like he'd been waiting with his finger on the ring button. "Alara, I hoped you'd see my note. What did my mother authorize?" My voice surprised me by not cracking. "A vendor linkage," he said carefully. "A sub-account labeled Carol Events attached to the trust, with language suggesting you'd approve retroactively. Standard practice is both trustees sign off. Given your funding percentage, I flagged it." I stared at the framed diploma on my wall until the letters doubled. I did not approve. Reverse what you can. Freeze all non-essential outflows until we review every linkage. He breathed out. "You're within your rights under the prudence clause. I'll add an internal memo and timestamp this call." "Send me the memo," I said, "and the vendor list." We hung up. The room seemed quieter than before, like speaking had wrung the sound out of it. I opened the portal and watched the dashboard bloom into graphs that knew too much. The florist charge sat on the ledger like a bruise. Last night's date, Mary Arch Florals, the card number with my digits wearing someone else's hand. Below it, a chain of payments I knew by heart. Club dues, utility floats, the shore house tax schedule, my temporary duty that had calcified into a $60,000 a year habit, salt rot and storm insurance on a house my parents used 2 months a year. Somebody had added the events sub-account 3 days ago. The audit trail showed approved by co-trustee phone call. I scrolled to the note field. Alara will confirm retroactively. The letters swam. There are two kinds of anger. The first is heat that blows your circuits. The second is a clean, cold line that straightens your spine. The second kind stood up in me. I called Stephen, the advisor a colleague had sworn by when I'd half-joked months ago about someday needing a firewall. "This is that day," I said, and sent him the portal access. He read fast. "You're carrying this trust. You can restrict disbursements to essential obligations and require dual digital signatures for any new vendor. We'll lock it in 10 minutes if you approve." "I approve," I said. "Document everything. If anyone questions me later, I want a trail so bright you can see it from a satellite." DocuSign pings arrived like heartbeats. Account status shifting from active to restricted. Two-factor switched to my device only. A new rule. No retroactive approvals. Stephen's follow-up email summarized it in bullet points that looked like a surgeon's operative note. Calm steps. No drama. Blood pressure returning to baseline. Then Christine, real estate attorney. Because if my mother could drape roses over my digits, she could just as easily drape kitchen tile over them too. I forwarded her a scan of the Shorehouse deed. She wrote back in minutes. "Your fractional interest is separable. If you want to list your share, we can prep the paperwork. Don't communicate with family. Route all notices through counsel." I took a pen and wrote in block letters on a sticky note, "Boundaries are enforced, not announced." I stuck it to the corner of my laptop where my mother's texts usually bloomed. Then the small work. Log into my bank, open the web of recurring payments I'd woven for years. Stephanie's rent and utilities. Cancel. Parents' club membership. Cancel. The monthly, just this once allowance my mother always dressed in lace. Cancel. With each confirmation click, something uncoiled behind my ribs. Relief can feel like grief when you've trained your nervous system to knot itself around other people's needs. At 12:17 a.m., the accountant's memo landed. Per call with E. Quinn, co-trustee/primary funder. Carol events linkage frozen. Florist charge placed in dispute. He'd attached a PDF of the audit trail and his digital signature. I downloaded it into a folder I labeled Storm. Not because anything mystical would happen to it, but because I would need the name later, when people tried to tell me no storm had ever passed through here. At 12:24 a.m., Stephen's bullet points pinged again with a final line. "Sleep. We'll hold the perimeter." I laughed once, the sound small and bright. Sleep. Right. I opened the text thread with my mother and scrolled back to the 4 words that had started this night. "We need space. Don't reach out." I typed understood and let the cursor blink. Then I erased the letters one by one. They hadn't asked for a conversation. They'd announced a boundary like a locked door. I could honor that without giving them the satisfaction of watching me knock. By 1:03 a.m., the trust was locked, the florist charge flagged, the sub-account severed, the auto-pay spigot closed. I made a note in my own words, because the future likes to gaslight the past. You acted, not reacted. You documented, not defended. You enforced, not begged. I wrote the time next to it like a patient's vitals. The kettle clicked off in my kitchen, and I didn't remember putting it on. I poured the hot water into the sink and watched the steam blur the window until the city beyond turned watercolor. The apartment hummed. My body, which had been performing competence for 16 hours, finally asked if it could be heavy. I let it. At 3:09 a.m., I refreshed the portal and found the florist charge officially in dispute, a gray flag beside it, like a little half-mast. Beneath the line item, the accountant had added a note, vendor notified, awaiting documentation. I pictured my mother at that party, cashmere at her shoulders, the arch of white roses, my father's toast, to the woman who made this family. I wondered how many times I had made that possible and called it love. At 4:25 a.m., my phone lit like a building on fire. My father first, 16 calls in 20 minutes, his voicemails the clipped bark of a man accustomed to yes. My mother 12, her tone sugared and slicing. My sister 8, punctuation like darts. 36 missed calls. A few notifications bled in from social media, Stephanie's name, a caption that began, Some people think money makes them better. I didn't click. I flipped the phone face down and slid it until it touched the lamp base. A small metal kiss. You asked for space, I said to the room, because sometimes you need to hear the air carry your words. Here it is. The radio tower outside blinked red, patient. I traced a square on my knee. Inhale 4, hold 4, exhale 4, hold 4. The breathing pattern Dr. King had taught me last week when I still thought space meant yoga classes and a break from the group chat. Turns out it meant lawyers and login pages and not picking up at 4:25 a.m. I turned off the lamp. The dark took the shape of a room that belonged to me. Morning would come with a flood of performances and pleas. Tonight had been a different kind of surgery. Quiet, clean, the cut you make to stop a deeper bleed. I let the quiet hold. I let myself be held. Cherry Hill was the kind of suburb that looked like it had been photoshopped before you even drove through it. Manicured lawns, gated cul-de-sacs, houses that all had names instead of numbers. The Pines, the Oaks, Belle Terre. My parents picked Cherry Hill like some people pick outfits. To be seen in, not lived in. From the outside, we looked like the kind of family who belonged there. Charles Quinn, real estate investor, always closing another deal, always shaking another hand at the country club. Carol Quinn, socialite and charity darling. Photographed beside silent auctions and wine tastings, her smile rehearsed down to the millimeter. And then there was Stephanie, 3 years older, forever the darling girl who drifted between half-baked ventures, while our parents called it soul-searching. And me, Alara, the daughter who wasn't a headline, just the footnote. Surgeon, income steady, the one who could be leaned on, the one who kept everything stitched together behind the glossy facade. It didn't start with the trust. At first it was small things, little asks disguised as favors. Alara, can you cover the taxes on the shore house just this once? Dad's waiting on a deal to close. Just this once stretched into years. $60,000 a year for a 6-bedroom coastal vacation home with a pool that nobody even bothered to clean until I hired a service. I didn't live there. I didn't visit more than twice a summer, but the bills were set up on my card, auto-pay humming along like it was part of my circulatory system. When the real estate market hiccuped, Dad said it was temporary. He said, "You're better with numbers anyway, Ellie. The trust will run cleaner under you." He handed me a binder and the passwords, like passing down a sword in some dusty ritual. It wasn't a gift. It was a burden dressed up as responsibility. I became the executor of everyone's lifestyle except my own. The trust was supposed to be safety net money, college funds, retirement padding, property upkeep. In reality, it was my bloodstream. My income fed it, and their whims drained it. Mom's utilities? Trust. Dad's club fees? Trust. Stephanie's endless list of emergencies? Always siphoned through the same portal, padded with my deposits. Her emergencies weren't the kind you could respect. Not broken bones or lost jobs, designer handbags, sudden yoga retreats, phone bills tripled by overseas shopping sprees. "It's just a tough month," Mom would say, soft voice, honed for manipulation. "Stephanie's struggling. You understand, don't you?" I wired the money every time, because who wants to be the one who lets their sister sink? Last year alone, the numbers were obscene. $75,000 floated to Stephanie's accounts. $60,000 for the shore house. Another $20,000 for utilities, car leases, and Dad's temporary liquidity gap. Nearly $155,000 in 1 year, all poured into keeping the Cherry Hill mirage alive. My 6-figure surgical salary could sustain it, but at the cost of my own life shrinking to fit their appetite. And the cruelest part? No one ever said thank you. Not once. Instead, Stephanie got the praise. She bought a new dress for a gala. She has such taste. She talked about starting a blog or a boutique. She's so entrepreneurial. I, meanwhile, could pull a patient back from the brink after 12 hours in the OR, and my father would just grunt, "That's nice, Alara. Did you wire the taxes yet?" I remember the science fair when I was 15. I built a working model of a cardiac valve, foam tubing, and food dye blood. First prize. My mother hugged Stephanie instead, who had painted something abstract and barely finished. She has such vision, Mom cooed, while I stood there, trophy in hand, invisible already. It's strange how patterns calcify. I thought maybe if I gave enough, money, time, help, they'd finally see me the way they saw her. But the more I gave, the more invisible I became. The successful daughter was never as dazzling as the dependent one. The trust ledger became a diary of everything they refused to acknowledge out loud. Each charge had a story. $4,200 to a contractor, the new sunroom Mom just had to have. $600 at an electronics store, Dad's impulsive gadget habit. $2,300 to a boutique hotel, Stephanie's research trip for some idea that vanished 2 weeks later. I memorized the numbers like other people memorize birthdays. And every time I logged in, I told myself a lie. That money was love, that keeping their house from foreclosure or my sister's lights from shutting off would one day be proof that I was indispensable. That maybe Dad's nods would last longer, or Mom's praise would stretch further than, "You're so responsible, Alara." But it never happened. Responsibility wasn't admiration. It was expectation. I didn't say that out loud to anyone. Not Julie at the hospital, not Dr. King when she first started digging into my family history. I carried it alone, a ledger where the balance was always in their favor. The day I logged in and saw the Carol Events sub-account tied to the trust, something broke. Because it wasn't just that they'd excluded me from that birthday party. It was that they'd used my money to pay for the flowers that framed the photos where I didn't exist. That was when I stopped being the family's treasurer and started being their forensic accountant. The night of the dinner started with the shine of a new Mercedes in my parents' driveway. Its black hood gleamed like a mirror, and for a split second, I caught my own reflection in it. Tired eyes, hair pinned up from a long shift, surgical scrubs swapped for a blazer that still smelled faintly of antiseptic. My father stood by the car, hands sweeping across the hood like he'd conjured it himself. 45 grand, fully loaded, he said with that particular grin he saved for other men at the club. Nothing but the best. Inside, the house smelled of roast beef and expensive candles. Mom was already setting out blueprints on the dining table like a magician with her props. She tapped one with a manicured nail, her rings catching the chandelier's light. Kitchen renovation, $70,000, and we're adding a sunroom. Can you imagine the Christmas mornings, Alara? I could imagine the bills. Dinner began civilly enough. Crystal glasses, a tablecloth that had never seen a stain, and Stephanie half slouched in her chair, scrolling her phone, chiming in only to say she was so over gluten. I tried to focus on my plate, but I knew the rhythm by heart. The small talk was just a warm-up. Sure enough, Dad cleared his throat halfway through the meal. "Alara, about the shore house," he said, tone deliberate. "The renovation's going to cost more than we thought. We'll need you to chip in another $20,000. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Another 20? On top of the 60 I already pay yearly? On top of everything else? Mom's voice slid in, sweet and sharp. "It's for the family, Alara. You're doing so well at the hospital. You can afford it." Stephanie finally looked up from her phone, smirking. "Yeah, Alara. It's just 20,000. What's the big deal?" I set my fork down carefully, like handling a scalpel. "The big deal is I'm already carrying all of you. The shore house, the utilities, Stephanie's bills. I can't keep adding more." Dad's face hardened. "We're not asking for much. You're a surgeon. You can afford it." That was when Stephanie leaned forward, eyes gleaming like she'd been waiting for her cue. "Speaking of money," she said, "I've got this amazing idea. A boutique, high-end fashion, exclusive brands. I need you to invest. Say, $50,000 to start." I stared at her. "A boutique?" She nodded, smug. "I've been researching this for weeks. I know what I'm doing." The memory of her last research project, a yoga retreat she abandoned after 3 days, burned in my mind. "Stephanie, that's a huge risk. You don't have any experience in retail. Most boutiques fail in the first year. I can't throw $50,000 at something with no plan." Her cheeks flushed crimson. "You don't believe in me. You just want to control everything." Mom's eyes narrowed. "Why can't you support your sister? She's trying to build something." Dad nodded. "Stephanie's got vision. You're too focused on your job to see it." The air in my chest thickened. My job is the reason you have this house. The reason the shore place hasn't been foreclosed on. I'm not a bank. I can't fund every whim. Dad slammed his hand on the table. The crystal glasses rattled. "Don't talk to us like that. Stephanie's trying to make something of herself. You could learn from her." The words hit harder than I expected. Learn from her. My sister, who lived rent-free, who couldn't keep a job for more than 6 months, who treated credit card bills like polite suggestions. I'm not funding the boutique, I said, voice steady. It's too risky, and Stephanie isn't ready. Mom gasped as if I'd cursed in church. How dare you talk about your sister like that? You've always been jealous of her. Jealous. The word slid into me like a scalpel under the ribs. I thought of every night I'd scrubbed into the OR, blood drying in my gloves, while Stephanie was out drinking, shopping, drifting. And now I was the jealous one. Stephanie smirked, leaning back in her chair. You're just mad because I'm creative. Not everyone wants to be a boring doctor. I clenched my fists under the table. I'm not boring. I'm realistic. Someone has to be. The rest of dinner blurred into a carousel of their voices, all circling around me, praising her ambition while slicing at my restraint. Every time I opened my mouth about money, about responsibility, they cut me off. You're too rigid, Mom said. You don't understand family, Dad added. We raised you better than this, Mom whispered, like a dagger in silk. By dessert, they were already planning Stephanie's boutique without me, their voices bright and eager, as though I hadn't spoken at all. When I left, the night air felt heavy, the Mercedes gleaming like an omen under the streetlight. In my car, I sat gripping the wheel until my palms hurt. A sticky note on the dashboard caught my eye, something I'd scrawled during a late shift at the hospital. Remember to breathe. So I did, but each breath felt like inhaling shards. The text sat on my phone like a bruise that wouldn't fade. We need space. Don't reach out. Underneath, Stephanie's bright red heart still pulsed. I tried to work through it, drowning myself in back-to-back surgeries, but the silence in between cases only amplified the echo. 2 days later, I sat across from Julie in a cramped coffee shop near the hospital. The smell of burnt espresso clung to the air, and her scrubs were wrinkled from the same kind of shift that had left me hollow-eyed. I told her everything. Mom's message, the birthday photos, the party I wasn't invited to. My voice broke once, then steadied into the flatness I usually reserve for dictating operative notes. Julie leaned back, eyes sharp. Alara, they're not pushing you away because you did something wrong. They're pushing you away because you finally said no. I bristled. It's not that simple. It is, she said, stirring her coffee with the kind of force that made the spoon clink like a metronome. You stopped feeding the machine, and when you stop feeding a machine, it fights back. Her words lodged inside me like shrapnel. I wanted to argue, but the truth had a way of tightening around my ribs until I couldn't breathe. That night, I found myself in a beige office that smelled faintly of lavender. Dr. Pamela King, calm eyes, soft gray hair pulled into a bun, sat with a legal pad balanced on her knee. No clipboard clatter, no judgment, just stillness. I pulled out my phone, showed her the text. Her expression didn't shift, but she underlined something on the pad. This isn't about space, she said. This is about punishment. I frowned. Punishment for what? For stepping out of your role. You've been their provider, Alara, not their daughter. Provider is conditional, useful only as long as you keep giving. Daughter should be unconditional. They don't see you as the latter. They only see the former. The words landed like a diagnosis I hadn't wanted, but always suspected. Provider, not person. I stared at the floor. So what? I just cut them off? Pretend I don't care? No, Dr. King said softly. You enforce boundaries. Boundaries aren't declared. They're maintained. You can't change them, Alara. You can only change how you respond. The silence in the room thickened. My throat worked as though I'd swallowed glass. For years, I'd believed if I gave enough, did enough, paid enough, they'd love me the way they loved Stephanie. But boundaries meant facing the truth. That love had never been for sale, and I had been bankrupting myself trying to buy it. Dr. King handed me a square of paper and drew a box with 4 arrows. Square breathing, she explained. Inhale 4, hold 4, exhale 4, hold 4. Do it whenever the panic grips you. I practiced once, feeling ridiculous, but the rhythm steadied me in ways I hadn't expected. Before I left, she said something that clung to me like iodine on skin. When you stop enabling a system, the system bites. Expect backlash, but expect freedom too. Walking back to my car, the air felt heavier and lighter all at once. My mother's text no longer looked like rejection. It looked like a line drawn in the sand. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid to stand on the other side. That night, I sat at my desk, the lamp carving a circle of gold in the darkness. My hands hovered over the keyboard, trembling not from doubt, but from resolve. I opened the trust portal, pulled up the auto pay web I had spun for years, and started canceling, one by one. As the confirmations rolled in, I pressed the sticky note from Dr. King to the edge of my laptop. Boundaries are enforced, not announced. I whispered it out loud, like a vow. The glow of my laptop lit up my apartment like a command center. Each click felt like severing a vein that had been draining me dry. First, the automatic transfers to my parents' utilities, gone. Then the rent payments I'd been funneling to Stephanie's account, canceled. Finally, the property tax drafts for the Jersey Shore house. I stared at the confirmation screen for a long time before hitting submit. It was nearly midnight when I called Stephen Reed, the financial advisor a colleague had recommended. His voice was clipped, professional, the kind that made you believe he'd already run 3 marathons before breakfast. "You've been managing this trust on your own?" he asked, disbelief seeping through the phone. "For years," I admitted. "My father handed it over after one of his deals tanked. I thought it was temporary." "You've put in nearly $1 million, Alara. They've contributed next to nothing." His pause stretched, deliberate. "You need protection. We can freeze the trust, transfer oversight to a neutral firm." The word freeze made my chest tighten, like I was shutting a door I couldn't reopen. But Stephen's certainty steadied me. "Do it," I whispered. Next came Christine Gray, a real estate lawyer. Her voice was calm, precise, like a surgeon mapping an incision. "Your share of the Jersey Shore house is legally yours. You can sell it without their consent. The market's good. You'd clear about $200,000. $200,000. Enough to remind myself I wasn't just their ATM, that I had built something of my own. I gave her the go-ahead. By 3 a.m., every tether I'd tied myself to was unraveling. The bank notifications buzzed in, each one a digital exorcism. I leaned back, exhaustion wrapping around me like lead, but underneath it, a strange clarity pulsed. I wasn't their safety net anymore. At 4:25 a.m., my phone erupted. Calls stacked like falling dominoes. 16 from my father, 12 from my mother, 8 from Stephanie. Voicemails pinged, their voices filling the dark. "Alara, what the hell are you doing?" my father's voice barked, each word clipped with rage. "How could you do this to us?" my mother sobbed. "We're family, Alara. Family doesn't abandon each other." Stephanie's message was pure venom. "You're ruining our lives. You're jealous because I'm finally living my truth, and you can't stand it." I sat there, phone buzzing, their panic ricocheting around my tiny apartment. But for the first time, I didn't answer. The next morning, the messages grew uglier. A text from my father. "Call me back or you'll regret this." From my mother. "We trusted you with everything, and this is how you repay us?" Stephanie didn't stop, each message sharper than the last. But what gutted me wasn't the threats. It was the silence beneath them, the confirmation of what Dr. King had said. They didn't want me. They wanted my money. Then came the public attack. I opened my phone to see Stephanie's social media post plastered across my feed. "Some people think money makes them better than family. Don't be fooled by my sister's success. She's heartless." Comments rolled in fast. What a betrayal. So cold. Strangers piling on, rewriting my life into a villain's script. My stomach churned, my hands shook, but I didn't delete the app. I read every word, letting the bile burn through me until it hardened into resolve. Christine reassured me over the phone. "It's nasty, but it's not defamation. Just noise. Keep your focus." Stephen echoed her. "They're panicking because you've taken control. Don't let their chaos dictate your next step." That night, I sat in the quiet, my phone lighting up every few seconds with their desperation. I stared at it, breathing in fours like Dr. King had taught me. In, hold, out, hold. I set the phone face down on the table. Let it buzz. Let them stew. Because this time I wasn't going to answer. For 3 days, I let the silence stretch. Every vibration of my phone felt like a test of willpower. My apartment, usually my sanctuary after endless hospital shifts, became a war zone of unanswered notifications. The walls almost hummed with their urgency. On the 4th night, a message broke through, not with rage, but with pleading. My mother's voice cracked in the voicemail. "Alara, we can't afford the house without you. Please, let's talk." I gripped the edge of my kitchen counter, the laminate digging into my palms. For a split second, guilt flared hot and sharp. But then I remembered her birthday photos, the glittering party, the smiles, the empty seat where I should have been. They hadn't missed me then, only the money. The next voicemail was from my father. His tone swung from controlled to threatening in the span of seconds. "You're breaking your mother's heart. Do you understand that? You're tearing this family apart. Call me back, or I'll make sure you regret this decision." I nearly laughed. Regret. As though regret hadn't been my shadow for years, crouched in every unacknowledged achievement, every sacrifice they erased. Stephanie's texts were relentless. "You're jealous. You've always been jealous. I finally have a job, Alara, and you're still punishing us. You're cruel." But it was her public post that twisted the knife deeper. Another rant, this time paired with a photo of her folding sweaters at her new retail job. The caption, "Some people thrive on seeing you struggle. My sister thinks she's teaching me a lesson, but really, she's just showing the world how heartless she is." The comments flooded in, her friends commiserating, strangers offering sympathy, some even praising her resilience. I sat in bed, scrolling through it all, the blue glow of my phone searing into my eyes. It felt like watching her script a play where I was cast as the villain. But then, a flicker of something unexpected, respect. She was working. Actually working. For the first time in her life, Stephanie wasn't floating on someone else's money. I closed the app, conflicted. Could I respect her effort while still resenting the poison she spewed about me? Could two truths exist side by side, that she was growing and that she had betrayed me? A week later, word trickled back through mutual acquaintances. My parents had sold their remaining share of the Jersey Shore house. The house that had drained $60,000 a year from my accounts was gone. My father, once the peacock of Cherry Hill, had traded his Mercedes for a used sedan. My mother's social media went quiet. No more photos of champagne glasses and gala gowns. Their world was collapsing, and I wasn't there to catch the rubble. The guilt came in waves. Late at night, I'd lie awake and hear my father's voice in my head, harsh and commanding. "You owe us." Then my mother's, soft and brittle. "Please, Alara, we're losing everything." But every time I reached for my phone, Dr. King's words cut through the fog. Boundaries aren't announced, they're enforced. And I had enforced them. By the end of the month, I realized something startling. The quiet wasn't suffocating anymore. It was liberating. Their frantic messages, their threats, their guilt, they were proof of how much they had depended on me, and proof that I wasn't dependent on them. For the first time in years, I was breathing without their weight pressing on my chest. 3 months passed before the silence settled into something steady, almost comforting. My phone, once a conduit of constant demands, now buzzed only with work updates or the occasional meme from Julie. The absence of my family's names lighting up my screen felt strange, but not empty. More like a wound closing, tender but healing. News of them reached me indirectly. A colleague who lived near Cherry Hill mentioned that my parents had downsized into a modest condo. "Saw your dad carrying groceries the other day," he said casually. "No Mercedes, just normal." The image struck me harder than I expected. My father, who once strutted through country clubs with a glass of scotch and a deal on his lips, lugging grocery bags like any other retiree. My mother, whose calendar used to overflow with charity galas, now absent from every social page. Their empire had shrunk to 4 beige walls and a used sedan. And then there was Stephanie. Rumor had it she was still at the clothing store, clocking 40 hours a week, paying her own rent. A friend even said she seemed proud. I should have felt vindicated, but instead I felt a dull ache of something I couldn't quite name. Respect? Regret? Maybe both. Her venomous posts still lingered in my mind. "She's heartless. She abandoned us." Words that had traveled farther than any defense I could have written. And yet, beneath the anger, I wondered if working had cracked something open in her, a glimpse of the resilience she never had to build before. As for me, my life expanded in ways I hadn't anticipated. I threw myself into research at the hospital, co-authoring a paper that landed in a major journal. I started teaching surgical residents, their hungry questions reminding me of my own early fire. I ran again, mornings along the Schuylkill, the city skyline rising pink and gold as if rewarding me for finally choosing myself. At night, I read, cooked, invited friends over for dinners, where laughter filled the space that used to echo with exhaustion. The money I'd once siphoned into a black hole now built a savings account with my name alone on it. I even toured a small brownstone downtown, imagining it filled with bookshelves and maybe, someday, someone who saw me as more than a provider. Still, there were moments, the kind that ambush you when you're not looking. A scent of my mother's perfume on a stranger in the elevator, a father hugging his grown daughter outside a restaurant, a sister's laughter drifting through an open window. Each one a reminder of what I'd lost, or maybe what I'd finally stopped chasing. Dr. King's words returned often in those moments. You can't change people who don't want to change, but you can choose yourself. And I had chosen. One evening, I sat on my balcony, city lights flickering like distant stars, and thought about the text that had started it all. We need space. Don't reach out. I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. I was free. If you've ever had to draw a line with family, you know how jagged it feels. You wonder if you're cruel, if you're selfish, if you're the villain in someone else's story. But sometimes survival looks like selfishness. Sometimes freedom looks like walking away. I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to set boundaries with people you love? What did it cost you, and what did it give back? Share your story in the comments. It might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Because if my journey has taught me anything, it's this. Love without respect isn't love, and silence, though heavy at first, can be the beginning of peace.